This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Good afternoon. My name's Helen Collis. I'm one of the journalists at POLITICO and I cover healthcare. And you're watching POLITICO Live, the live extension of our journalism. I'm coming to you today from ACE Events in Brussels, where we will be discussing the many challenges in diagnosing and treating people with rare diseases, and what Europe can do to help overcome some of these hurdles. In Europe, there are around 20 million people living with a rare disease. It takes an average of 5 years to get a correct diagnosis, and so far treatments have just been developed for 6% of these diseases that we know about today. For more than 2 decades, Europe has taken strides to try to spur the development of medicines for rare diseases. The EU has also set up expert groups that meet online to discuss their cases. Pilots are underway at the European Medicines Agency to support developers, including academics, to bring their drug candidates in rare diseases to market. And there are several initiatives in Europe aimed at improving access to therapies, from cross-border healthcare, multi-country buying groups such as Benelux, and soon EU-wide health technology assessments. However, the vast majority of patients with rare diseases continue to have no specialized therapy, while the lucky few whose disease is treatable, access to drugs is not guaranteed across Europe. In autumn last year, a majority of EU countries supported calls for an EU rare disease plan proposed by the Czech presidency. Today, we'll be delving into many of these issues facing people with rare diseases and their families, and how Europe can further help to improve their lives. But first, some housekeeping. I would like to thank our partner, Sanofi, for making this event possible, and to thank our audience joining us here in Brussels and online. We would like to make this event as interactive as possible, so you can participate by tweeting it at @LivePolitico and asking questions through Slido using the hashtag #OvercomingRareDiseases. I will be prioritizing questions sent with a name and organization. You can already share your thoughts by answering the following poll presented by Sanofi. What should be the top priority in overcoming rare diseases in the EU? Before we get started, we'll now hear some opening remarks from our partner, Manuela Buxo, Head of Europe for Sanofi's Specialty Care Division.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Manuela Buxo, and I'm the Head of Europe for the Specialty Care Division of Sanofi across multiple therapeutic areas such as immunology, oncology, neurology, and rare diseases. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you in person today, but I still wanted to take the opportunity to address an incredibly important challenge that we're all facing at the moment in Europe, which is the need to overcome the burden of rare diseases. In Europe alone, 30 million individuals battle the hardship of rare diseases every single day, with 95% of those conditions still lacking any treatment options. And as we gather here today, I know that we all believe that rare diseases should not be marginalizing individuals within our society. So it is our collective mission to advocate for change and strive for a future where every person affected by a rare disease receives the care, the support, and the treatment they deserve. Over the past decades, Europe has made some significant progress towards addressing this issue across our region. Patient organizations, medical professionals, researchers, policymakers, and the industry have come together to advance rare disease research, improve the diagnosis rates, and foster innovation in treatment options. But there's still so much work to be done. Together, we must work to ensure that the treatments are developed to help patients, and especially those patients that suffer from the 95% of rare diseases that currently have no options. And at Sanofi, we're playing our part through research and development and collaboration with university hospitals, European reference networks, and patient organizations. While the revision of the orphan drug legislation represents a great first step, it is only covering a fraction of the challenges we face. We desperately need a European plan to tackle rare diseases. And this plan should establish stronger regulatory incentives so we can improve early diagnosis and offer faster and fairer access to treatments. We know that Europe can actually take bold measures in times of need. We've seen it with the oncology challenges Europe faced and how it chose to address those with the Europe's Beating Cancer plan. This plan serves as a noteworthy comparison, at least for me, as it tackles the entire disease pathway, focusing on 4 critical areas where the European Union can actually make a significant impact. First, prevention. Second, early detection. Third, diagnosis and treatment. And fourth, the quality of life for cancer patients and survivors. Just as the European Union took decisive action with this plan, we must now unite and adopt a comprehensive approach towards rare diseases across Europe. And I'm very pleased to see that rare disease is one of the priorities of the health program for the Spanish presidency of Europe starting in July. The power to make a difference is in our hands. Together, we can ensure that no disease, no matter how rare, is left untreated or overlooked. I'll now hand it over to today's speakers to share their vision on how we can improve the lives of people affected by rare diseases in Europe. I wish you all a great event and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Manuela. Now we'll jump straight into our panel discussion. So I'll introduce some fantastic speakers we've got who are all experts in the field of rare diseases today. First joining me here will be Olga Solomon. Where are you, Olga? Who's acting director for medical products and innovation at the European Commission's DG Santé. Next, we have Timo Volkan, an MEP from Germany with the Socialists and Democrats group and rapporteur on the European Parliament's report on the authorization and supervision of medical products for human use. That's a mouthful. We next have Helen Dollfuss, head of the Medical Genetics Department at Strasbourg University Hospital and coordinator of the European Reference Network for Eye Diseases. Avril Daly, president of Eurodis, the rare disease patient group in Europe. And finally, Tina Taub, who leads market access and orphan drug policy at the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations. Thank you all for joining us today. So, if we think about the start of a journey to getting treatment for a patient with rare disease, the first big hurdle for them is going to be, and their families, is going to be the right diagnosis. The figures are that it takes 5 years, but that's an average. So for some people, it'll be quicker, and some people, it'll be even longer than 5 years. Helen, I'd like to ask you first, you're at the coalface of witnessing the difficulties that people face with rare diseases, and diagnostics in particular. Can you explain to us why it takes so long, even in times when we have such advances in genetic testing?
So there are many reasons to explain this odyssey to get a diagnosis, and that can be quite long for a lot of patients. There have been a lot of progresses, including for genetic diagnosis and the genome sequencing. However, if you look at the European scale, the access to these diagnoses may be very heterogeneous and not really homogeneous on the technology point of view and also on the accessibility for each patient on the European territory. Also, there are some conditions that are not genetic and also that require some very specific biological testing that also may not be always available. And in addition, today there are still some rare diseases. We don't know exactly what is the cause of these diseases. These are the unsolved, the broad group of diseases that are still unsolved.
Mm-hmm. Wow, so how can we ensure that patients in Europe across Europe in all countries can really access the best diagnostics with advances in genetic tests? How can we really cut that time frame down from the average of 5 years?
So one way of doing that, because there are many different ways, but one way is really to lean on the European reference networks who really are structuring the healthcare and the way how to access to diagnosis and also to therapies. So this is one way where from different member states, and most European reference networks covers most of the member states in 24 different rare disease fields. And this is one of our missions to ease this access.
Mm-hmm. And Avril, I'd like to bring you in here as our patient representative on the panel today. How easy is it for patients in Europe to be directed to the best channel for them, to get the right diagnostic, to find out what their disease is? Is it easy to access these ERNs, these European reference networks?
Well, it depends. I mean, is the straight answer where you live and what your disease is. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of opportunity that the ERNs provide, but I think it's very important to state that ERNs are still very much fledgling organizations. Okay. They have only been a reality since 2017. And while it's great to see them be established, as a one-stop shop, as we often say in the patient community for rare diseases, I mean, they were established to find a home for all rare diseases in 24 networks, which is ambitious to say the least, but possible and doable. And I think there's been a great deal of work done by ERNs to focus on how we can, look at technology and the advancements of technology in diagnostics and screening and early detection and bring them into ERNs, but they need to be supported in order to be able to deliver that care. So we're really at the stage now where we're just starting to embed ERNs at a national level. And try to encourage that national, support of the ERNs and their work, which is really to ensure that patients can walk into a clinic in Dublin and that a clinician can contact somebody in Ghent and say, I have the same patient, I recognise this symptom. This is something that we can address. And it is happening, but we need to see more of it. And the only way that we can see more of that is to invest in the process it's not enough just to establish it. The investment needs to be there to ensure that it can realise its full potential for that, what is a huge challenge for patients, that diagnostic odyssey.
Mm. Would you agree with that, Helen?
Yeah, totally. And actually, the missions of the ERNs in the next 4 years is to participate to a joint action to see how we can really invest our efforts at the national level of the healthcare systems of each member state. So this is really one of our main missions in the next years.
Mm. And just looking at this issue of investment and sort of the more support needed, where do you think that investments should come from? I mean, you've talked about it really being embedded now in the national models. Are you saying that nationally governments need to really focus on this?
Me?
Avril, yes.
Yes, yes is the answer. Everybody needs to. There needs to be opportunities for investment into these infrastructures. I mean, they really hold the key for so many of us. They hold the key for, as we say, diagnosis, care, and treatment. If you think of the logo and the tagline for ERNs, it's share, care, cure. It's about sharing information in order to provide up-to-the-minute care pathways that are evolving all of the time through innovation, so that we can deliver therapies and new approaches to care. That has to be something that governments can support. It has to be where regional, for example, the European Commission can support, but we need to also look at the opportunity of public-private partnerships in order to be able to sustain that into the long term. And I think that's something that we really need to discuss and consider for the long-term sustainability. And I mean, even since the advent of ERNs, I mean, ERNs is something we lobbied for, we advocated for 20 years ago. It's gone through many iterations. It's only been, as I said, established since 2017. And already we've seen so many technical advances. And not only that, in that period, we've also seen the development of care pathways for patients that previously hadn't any care pathway, had no method of getting access into a healthcare system. So there's lots done, lots more to do, and I think a very serious conversation about sustainability.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
If I may add the European aspect, because very much to build on what Avril said, and Helen, it's like, it is 2017, so we see now the results, and there is still a kind of support, because, with the new EU for Health, I think Helen mentioned the joint action, so it is very important now, the integration into the national healthcare system, so that, we can give it a boost. And also there is the will to continue to support with a new wave of support, from the EU for Health, which is on 77 million, which are more targeted into this more integration and more specific, with integration into the health systems, more targeted use of the registries, etc. So there is a will, there is a lot who has been done, and we need to consolidate this work and build upon.
We have a lot of topics to cover in rare diseases, and I want to stick with you, Olga, because as we know, the European Commission has just recently delivered a huge package of legal proposals for the pharmaceutical sector, many of which impact products in the development for rare diseases. So currently, orphan drugs have 10 years of market exclusivity from the time of marketing authorization, and this clock of 10 years starts again every time they get a new indication. This has been successful in attracting investors and drug developers to deliver some of the treatments that we now see coming through today. Can you walk us through the changes that have been proposed by the Commission, specifically for the incentives for rare diseases? I understand it's going to reduce this 10-year period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Actually, it's, through the evaluation, we found out that it was a successful legislation intervention in terms of bringing more investment in areas, where we had a market failure. And, also, we recognize that rare diseases remain still an unmet medical need in terms, of investment, because of the reasons that Helen explained, it is difficult areas of development. So if you will see, in general, the philosophy of the change of the legislation, it is a modulation where we combine the reward or, somehow promoting innovation, but with public health objectives, as we say. And one of those, it is, the access. We mentioned that sometimes, we have medicines. You mentioned it in the beginning, but we don't. Not all patients have access to it. Also the issue of addressing areas of unmet medical needs. And for example, for rare diseases, we see very often that we see development in certain areas, which is very, very positive. And then we stay with developments around the same areas. We see segregation because, of course, it is easier to develop. So recognizing that we still need to actually promote and reward innovation in this area, we don't modulate drastically the system of incentives. So we had kind of one size fit all, 10 years for every orphan medicinal product. What do we suggest now? It is for all orphans, it will be 9 years, so it's not such a huge difference. But at the same time, we recognize that there are areas, where we want to actually, see more direction of, funding, of investment, etc. And there, we say, if it is for high unmet medical need, then there will be an extra year of market exclusivity. What do we mean by high unmet medical need? It is areas where we don't have any medicine, or if we have any medicine that the new one needs to bring, really, a significant advancement, in the area of in that condition, and in addition that it has to have an effect on reduction of morbidity and mortality. It sounds, a bit difficult, and but at the same time, it is kind of, as I said before, a message that, where we want to see investment, because there we don't have treatments. And in that respect, we recognize that there are, of course, limitations in science, but, still we have seen that, with some rewards and if you like incentives, we can see things moving. Now, coming back to your question about the indications, because you put a specific question, now sometimes we could see, a medicine that, when it reaches the 10 years, it can be 1 indication, 2, 3 indication, and then for each one, products could have a separate period of market exclusivity, so plus 10 years every time, but only for the new indication. So what we want to do, but sometimes the system was misused to artificially create exclusivity periods, and this actually blocked other products from the market. So what we are suggesting here, it is we do want to continue to see development for new indications. That's what it is all about. We want to see new indications, but what we say it is the first and the second indication, they will get, a new period of, market exclusivity, and for the whole molecule. So, a new additional, year, but for a whole molecule, which is, quite an important. So to reward even more, this development. But at the same time, we cap at 12 years because we don't want to see an artificial proliferation, of, evergreening. So we want to really see meaningful innovation, and not, our evaluation didn't show that, there was, a great misuse. It's just that we want to somehow make the system more performant and more, focused towards patient needs.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for that summary. Tina, you're our pharmaceutical industry representative of the panel today. As Olga said, the system was artificially used and blocked competition. What's your reaction to that? And what are your responses also to what's been presented now from the Commission for rare disease drugs?
Thank you. Let me start a little bit with the idea of steering into unmet medical need areas more investment. Because the point here is, yes, if we wish to address unmet medical need, we need to invest in research and development. That's it. And I guess this is something where we can agree on. Now, and with this, we very much applaud to the achievements the orphan regulation, the current one, achieved, because it delivered treatment options up to 6.3 million people, and it progressed many overlooked conditions. There is no doubt about that. Now, when it comes to unmet medical need, we have a lot of them out there, unfortunately. And when it comes to unmet medical need in rare diseases, we talk about thousands of individual conditions where it is absolutely hard at some point to even crack the nuts really to make scientifically progress. So pharmaceutical industry is investing into those areas, but of course there is always room for improvement, very clearly. But the challenge is there is no easy fix to it. And what we see as an issue, or let's say, what is the reason why we do see a lack of therapeutic options? And the 95% have already been mentioned, that there is no treatment option for the majority of disease and the minority of patients. We should keep this in mind. It's very clearly that we do see consequences out of this as we have issues and challenges with existing barriers scientifically, first of all, of course, regulatory as well as economic. And they are further compounded with uncertainties when it comes to pricing and reimbursement. So considering all of this complexity, and now coming to the revision and the proposals, what we do see there, and we also need to underline that it's not just about the revision for the orphans, it's the whole package we talk about here, which has implications overall. We are quite so concerned, and I guess this is not surprising at all at this stage, because if we wish to move the needle to meet unmet medical needs, we need to do more. So FPA, we agree to the objectives to increase access, patient access to treatment options, to strengthen competitiveness. When we look at the points, how do we strengthen competitiveness? Not by reducing incentives. We need more there. We need predictability in order to be really able to invest and to ensure attractiveness of the European market. Second point, we wish to increase access. Well, we agree to this as well, but the regulation is not the right place to do so. And we also see, of course, the linkage and the idea what was put forward by the Commission is impossible to fulfill by one stakeholder, because we all know that also member states play a crucial part in the price negotiations and for the reimbursement processes as such. So looking at all of this, we moving forward in order to really meet the unmet medical needs, it's crucial that, first of all, we steer up private-public partnership. We did this with the Rare Disease Moonshot, together with other partners like Herodis, to really break down the silos for this. This is outside the regulation. The regulation cannot do this. Get the regulation review in a way that we really are able to meet the objectives, the increasing access as well as strengthening competitiveness. And if we wish to move the needle, what we have to do, very obviously, in order to have a better access situation for the majority of patients in Europe, we need to find collaborative solutions. So meaning bringing those who are responsible for the process, bringing them on one table to find those.
Very interesting. Olga, did you want to respond to any of those points?
Yeah, I mean, I can respond if I don't take the floor too much. I mean, actually, we agree that, it is an ecosystem. The regulation alone cannot, change, but, where I still think that, we have to see the regulation not only the relation of unmet medical need, with the incentives, because what we are building there, it is different tools that are combined, can bring a change. Just to be a bit more specific, I mean, with regard to the ecosystem and along the life cycle, by making an attempt for the first time, to put criteria of what it is an unmet medical need, by having discussion across stakeholders, including HTA bodies, pricing and reimbursement body, industry, patient association, in the guidelines, we create kind, of, as you said, a move of the needle into, defining the needs, across the life cycle. And, you are very right to say that, science, it is an important element. But, for example, there is a lot of public funding that it goes into research. If we define unmet medical needs, even, the starting point, where you fund research, it can be also harmonized. So, I fully agree with you that, it is, the regulation itself is not a silver bullet, cannot solve all the issues, but it can contribute, it can be an enabler, and can also accelerate, can be a catalyst to changes. I mean, you said that it is impossible and there is it's not predictable. It is, there is a process, and there is, I mean, for example, we are speaking about orphan medicines. When a company invests at the designation stage to an orphan medicine product, they don't know in the end if they will have the status of orphan. So it is the same thing, with the incentives. You need to do something. Indeed, there is an element of unpredictability because you have to work more. Now it is one size fits all. You will get the 10 years in any case. Now, and there is work that needs to be done by both parties, both from industry, but also from the member states. It is a common objective to increase patient access. So both parties need to work together to achieve that. But at the same time, it is not, and it is an incentive for companies, and also, it is not very strict. The member states can, what we want, it is for people to come and discuss together, to catalyze this discussion in all member states, so that there is, this reach out for patients in all EU. At the same time, a member state may not be, again, speaking about orphan medicines, maybe it cannot accommodate a certain treatment at a certain time. They can pass it. The company can get the incentive, because the company may say, not that I don't want the medicine, but I do not need to give you, I can give my okay for the extension at this point of time. It is, it makes the system different, it is true for everyone, but, the aim, it is to catalyze change beyond, the incentives. That's what I want to say.
Timo, you have the difficult job
well,
of compiling the European Parliament's report on this new regulation that we've been discussing here for medicines. Based on the conversations, obviously, you're hearing today, but also the conversations you're having with MEPs on the ENVI committee that you work with, what's the feeling? Is there any indication of support for the incentives that the Commission has put forward so far? I wonder if you'd give us any kind of hints.
Well,
which directions might-
unfortunately, we weren't able to start the official work.
Not
of course,
officially.
as we are still lacking the translation. So my pledge would be, or my plea would be to speed it up a bit so that we can indeed start the process of working on the proposal in the Parliament. So first of all, I would like to congratulate Olga and her team and all her colleagues to finally having published the revision. And I think it is desperately needed. And in this discussion, I think we can already see where different opinions lie, and this is also true for the European Parliament. So I personally think that the Commission's approach in encouraging and incentivizing the development is a good way to go, and I hope that we will be able to strengthen this idea indeed a bit more in the Parliament. And obviously, we have to increase transparency when it comes to funding. Was already mentioned. Yes, developing new drugs is expensive, but it's also true that it is quite unattractive for some companies to do so because there are not so many customers, luckily. So we have to address this gap, this issue, and for that we need more transparency when it comes to funding for on the one side. On the other hand, we need, of course, more incentives, and I think the way the Commission proposed could work. But let's see what the discussions in the Parliament bring. And I think one final remark is that the national healthcare systems have been under a lot of pressure, financially, capacity-wise, but also financially. And we have, of course, to take this into account as well. And if we are looking at exclusivity periods, the longer they become, of course, the more expensive it will become for the member states. And this is what we also have to take into account, and we will do so. But I cannot tell you yet in which direction, as we haven't discussed it officially. So I could guess, but I think this is not what I'm here for today.
I could argue against that. You have also the added challenge of trying to deliver this position before the Parliament's work has to stop for elections next year. Do you think that's even possible at this stage?
Well, we have an ambitious timeline planned. In our timeline also leaves some room for some delays, not many and not long, but at least a few weeks. But it all depends on the availability of the translation, because the Parliament's process can only start once the translation arrives, and for that we need to have it as soon as possible, but at the latest in September. So this is what I'm hoping for, what I'm pushing for, and if translation starts, if translation arrives, I am optimistic that we can, if we all put our strengths together and join the forces, we can deliver. But of course, this is not set in stone, and it really depends on the willingness of all involved parties.
And we've seen further gains to the far right in Europe recently with the Greek elections at the weekend, and similar trends in Italy and Spain. I'm wondering if that's replicated in the European Parliament elections next year. What impact do you think it might have on the direction of the pharma package proposal, specifically around incentives for rare disease drugs?
Well, whenever the far right becomes stronger, nationalism grows, and this doesn't help if you're tackling rare diseases, especially when it comes to rare diseases and unmet needs. It is more important to work together, to join forces, to use the reference networks, to facilitate the new European health data space. And this only works if you're working European, if you're thinking European, if you're opening borders, if you are given access to data from other countries. And if the far right or the right-wing parties win, and if they are trying to turn back the wheel of the European project back to nationalism, especially people and our citizens will suffer. So I hope that this will not happen during the election, and I personally will do my utmost possible, of course, to fight against this movement at the moment. And I'm quite optimistic that the next parliament will be able to work and will be able to deliver for our citizens.
Great, thank you. We've still got some big challenges ahead politically, at least in reaching an agreement on these proposals. I want to draw us back to some of the other issues that rare disease patients have in accessing medicines and treatment. And I want to talk about clinical trials. Helen, is it easy to find out what experimental drug candidates might be an option for your patients? How do they go about that, and is it easy?
So I would say on clinical trials that, I mean, of course, finding a drug for a specific disease is a long process with research and interest then of a pharmaceutical company, and then going for clinical trials. Of course, there are a lot of rare diseases and a lot of options, and there is a real need to invest in research and preclinical research. That is a real point. There is another area where there is a real need to harmonize and to really be conscious that rare diseases cannot be dealt as common diseases, because the size of for clinical trials, the size of the population is usually quite small. And also the disease in itself, sometimes it's life-threatening, sometimes it's pediatric population, and a child is not a small adult. And other times it's diseases that are very chronic and that last a long time. And what is very important is to see what is meaningful for the patients, and what is meaningful for a lot of these disorders is that there is a stability that is given by the compound. And this is very difficult to measure, and it can take time to measure, and the methodology of these trials has really to be revised, adapted to the field of rare diseases. And this brings me also to the regulators who are going to judge these trials and to give an opinion on this. Of course, safety is of utmost importance, but it is really important to see, to be able to adapt the experimental design to the real-world evidence that is gathered by these trials, and hopefully they will get more and more in real-world evidence-based medicine. And so really it's very important to adapt, and also if approval can be speeded up with, for instance, conditional approvals, this would be really a very important point for the specific field of rare diseases.
And is there a good relationship between industry and the European reference networks with regards to setting up trials and designing the trials, especially with your
Yes,
expertise?
I mean, for years we've been working hand in hand with the industry, of course, because what we want before all is to bring treatment to our patients who are suffering from these disorders, and they are really, most of them, desperate to go on trials because there is nothing else to propose often to these patients. So this is very important, and I must say that the relation with industry has been extremely good between the medical field and the industrial field. So this is very important, and this partnership, as Avril stated before, should be strengthened, and there should be more bridges between both worlds.
And I want to talk about not only the regulatory data, but the health technology data that's required to even bring these medicines to market. Tina, how easy is it to carry out a pivotal trial for a rare disease with a small patient group and tick all those boxes and bring it to market?
It's not easy. So we've heard this already. There are a lot of challenges, and when it comes, there are generally challenges when setting up clinical trials for specific product and projects. And when it comes to these kind of investments and project and trials, it's even harder when we talk about rare diseases, as we've already heard. So it's not easy. However, it's needed in order to meet unmet medical needs, to progress care, treatment option with this, but it's not easy. the quick answer, I guess.
And do you think regulators and HTA bodies, and specifically looking at the draft methodology we've got so far for the HTA regulation for Europe, do you think they're moving in the same direction and allowing the flexibilities that are needed to see these products have an added value and be brought to market?
So I guess we're now in different timelines, so to say. We have, on the one hand, the pharma review, where it is about modernizing the regulatory pathways. How do we deal with real-world evidence? How do we deal with other data sources, which is absolutely crucial. And this means also that the regulatory agencies are a bit ahead of those kind of discussions because they are already confronted with it. Now, when it comes to the EU HTA regulation, we are in the implementing phase. So we have an agreed text. We discuss how to implement it. And of course, the methodology, etc., is part of this discussion. If we are there yet, I would say no. If we get there, hopefully, the response would be. But having explicitly this exchange between, as it is envisaged in the EU HTA regulation, between regulators, the developers, as well as the HTA bodies, this is absolutely crucial because we need to discuss what is needed to serve both purposes, the marketing authorization process as well as the EU HTA process.
And once a medicine is approved, Avril, access to it varies significantly across Europe from country to country, from the patients in the north and west most likely to get these treatments first, and patients in the further east and possibly in the south maybe even waiting years to get the same treatments. Is it time for truly a single market for these types of products? Should the EU negotiate and purchase drugs like cell and gene therapies for all European patients that need them?
Well, as a European patient, you have the right to access, fundamentally as a citizen of Europe. And it is really one of the most difficult conversations to have in a position as in a patient organization is to talk to your fellow patient in a specific country who cannot access what their colleague in a different country can. And we have seen through the delays in accessing what this really means, to people is in many cases life or death. In many cases, the ability or a disability progressing to the point that when they do get eventual access in a country, it's too late. And so we do need to look at how we work together from a European perspective on solving that issue. There's been many discussions about that. There's been many ways, we've got the Benelux situation, we've got, discussions on procurement, joint procurement. We have to look at all of these potential avenues because it's not fair and it's not right, and it's as simple as that. And there's just another point that I just wanted to raise in the context of all of this, and in the context of the legislation as well. As patients reading through what was a hefty document, there was a couple of things in particular that struck us. And you look at the issue of exceptional therapeutic benefit. From a patient perspective, sometimes where there is no other treatment, what does that mean? Is that curative? Is that durable? Will that make a difference to the patient? And then when you look further through the text, and it talks about engaging in scientific advice, etc., and bringing in experts where you shall bring in experts, but you may bring in patients. We're very concerned about that because we believe that affects the development of therapies right the way through from the clinical trial development stage, where patients are now engaged in the process of developing endpoints that are appropriate for their need, and also patient-reported outcome measures. And also remembering that in a lot of the research, the clinical and medical research programs that researchers apply or clinicians apply for, they need to have the patient perspective, patient public involvement in research, because it has been proven to be effective, to be beneficial to the community at large. So we're really worried about that word shall, and I can't let that go because, you know, shall versus may makes a big difference, because we have 20 years of patients being engaged in various different committees at a European level, at an EMA level, providing advice that we know has had benefit. And that's something that we feel would be a move away from where we are right now. So it's probably something that we need to discuss further, because it can support the development and the advancements of clinical trials and effective health technology assessment processes, because it does follow through. It is a journey, you know, and oftentimes in the HTA process, you know, assessors will go back to the clinical trial data and they look at what was developed in the clinical trial, and we need patients engaged right across the board.
That's also one of the questions from the audience, from someone defined as SB, asking why are patients an optional representative for EMA while pricing and reimbursement bodies are mandatory. Perhaps, Olga, you could respond to those.
Yeah, I think, you know, yeah, it is good points, Evelyn. And this also, you know, shows that how important it is to explain, you know, the meaning of the legislation. I mean, with regard to the patient's representation, I think it was definitely not the meaning of, you know, our proposal to reduce the participation of patients, but instead to increase it. You know, you could see, you know, for example, for the first time we proposed the participation of patients even in the main committee of the EMA, you know, with an important, you know, number of patients representatives. So, you know, coming to the shall or may, you know, I mean, when we are talking about guidelines, we are that they are developed, you know, by the agency. The may, it was not, you know, just to say that, you know, the agency may decide or not to invite, but it is depending on the issue of that, you know, that it is discussed, you know, that patients may have a role or not. Maybe it is, you know, but certainly, you know, I will not defend now the may provision, you know, but because the intention, you know, was actually, you know, to include, to be inclusive to the patients, you know, that it is more of the legal drafting, how do you put it? It was, you know, where relevant, it meant, you know, where actually, you know, your voice has a meaning, you know, not issues that they are not relevant for patients, if they are such. But it was not may that, you know, we may decide to include you or not. That was not the issue. On exceptional therapeutic, also treatment, you know, it just to say, because you asked if there is no treatment, then, you know, it is a high unmet medical need. And another point that I wanted to make as well is that, you know, if it is not high unmet medical need, it doesn't mean that it is not an unmet medical need, because rare diseases, they are always, you know, an unmet medical need for us. So it is a focus. It's just that, you know, this misinterpretation that, you know, if you are not a high unmet medical need that will bring you one more year of market exclusivity, you do not have a status anymore. No, it's very important. Of course, every single orphan medicine, you know, it's, you know, very important. And that's why, you know, we start with 9 years of market exclusivity. So it is relative, how do we read, you know, this legislation? I mean, I want to highlight this, you know, for us, every rare disease is an unmet medical need.
Timo, did you want to come in on any of those points around high unmet medical need, unmet medical need?
Well, very quickly. So first of all, I'm happy that we still discuss the HTA, you know, and this is what I begin my mandate with. So it's good that it's not forgotten, because I think it's really a step in the right direction. And when we discussed patient involvement, this was for us during the HTA process also very important that we also take on board and bring patient organizations on the table. It was a very hard fight, and in the end, we didn't get as far as I wanted. But we have a new chance with this legislation, and this is one point we already noted. So I just wanted to mention that very quickly.
Thank you. Tina, one of the things that Avril mentioned there was joint procurement. And industry has come out previously not particularly supportive of joint procurement on many fronts. I'm just wondering what your response would be to joint procurement in rare diseases, rare disease drugs, for example. Because arguably, if a deal was reached within 2 years of marketing authorization for all EU countries, with the European Commission leading it, for example, wouldn't that be in the industry's benefit? Because then all of them would claw back that extra year of marketing exclusivity. I just wondered what your thoughts are on joint procurement in this area.
Well, so I think I can be brief. For us, there is no distinction if we talk about rare disease or non-rare disease with this regard, because in our understanding, joint procurement has a right to be there if we talk about severe health threats. So don't get me wrong here, but in the pandemic, it was a tool helpful in order to overcome it and to find a solution. But even in pandemic, we've seen quite challenges to get it done properly in an appropriate time frame. But of course, we see benefits when it comes to cross-country collaborations. And we have those examples. Benelux has been named. Other initiatives are there, which are voluntary in nature, where member states who see an advantage and benefit of it get engaged with companies to negotiate the prices and reimbursement, so to say, across countries. And this is something where we can see very clearly benefits of it.
Okay. I want to look now a little bit at the idea of an EU rare disease plan and what that might look like and what it might mean. Really focus on where the EU can make a difference, which the Czech presidency issued its calls for it last year. Olga, as our Commission representative today, can you tell us what progress, if at all, has been made towards such a plan?
I mean, just to start, by the fact that as I said, before, for rare diseases, for the Commission has always been a priority. I mean, since 1999, I saw in my notes that, we started with actions for rare diseases, and it continues to be a priority, and also, with all the initiatives that we have, we see that there is a lot of benefit in EU collaboration. At the same time, we had the 2009 Council recommendation, and there were a lot of, initiatives which are still valid. The objectives are still there. So, and a lot of initiatives that they are ongoing, or, new funding which is coming in. The ERNs, I think it is a very good example. We have a lot of research projects under the framework programs. We had from 2007 to 2022, 4 billion euros, and we have new initiatives coming up, even with partnerships, as was mentioned, with Helen from 2024, new partnerships, with industry, with, yet new money, fresh money coming into for support. The European Platform of Rare Diseases, where, we actually try to get the benefit of the data on rare diseases so that, we do not have fragmentation between different registries. The European Health Data Space, also, an important element that will contribute into the discussion of rare diseases with the health data, the power of data, and, of course, also the revision of the legislation. So this to say that, so far, we haven't identified kind of a need for a new plan, but more like, to continue implementing and actually, support what we have started.
Mm-hmm. Avril, I'd like your response to that. I know Eurordis has come about supporting the idea of an action plan for rare diseases. What's your response to what Olga's said?
Yes, I mean, the Eurordis were involved in a Commission-supported initiative, Rare 2030, the Foresight study, where over 250 people across Europe, who representing all stakeholder groups, made 8 recommendations. They are very sensible recommendations that should be included in a framework. And I think it's important to say that there is a lot happening right now in the context of rare diseases. There are a lot of different legislative approaches happening. There's a lot of policies being acted and a lot of discussions that are becoming a reality. But a framework is very important, to be able to structure it around all of these actions around a framework so that they support each other and that there's not a sort of a siloed mentality that can often occur where, there isn't that structure. It's really important. And we want to ensure that rare diseases remains a public health priority because it's still, we've advanced a lot in the past 14, 15 years. When was the last time we discussed, the development of an action plan in Europe in rare diseases? We have had so much advances in technology, in the way in which, as we said already, we diagnose, we treat, we care for patients. We're looking at this approach not only now in a healthcare setting, really, but also looking at the patient holistically, looking at their well-being, the mental health, the social care, the education access, the access to employment, all of these issues that are really fundamentally important to the person and the patient. So a structured approach is always best. It has been best in the past, and it can be best with all of this work that's going on. You know, for example, I think the European health data space has been mentioned. That's really a critical area as well. You know, so we need to look at how we add value as Europe in bringing things together and putting it into that type of framework. But what's really important as well is you know, we're at a time of, we're talking here today, and one of the fundamental discussions on the legislation is about creating an innovative Europe so that we can be highly competitive, that we can compete with, you know, the United States, Asia, other areas that, you know, are advancing at a pace, and we're not advancing as much. However, we have so much talent, we have so much ability, and we have the structures to work together. It's, are we using them appropriately? Are we investing in them appropriately? Are we really investing in research, you know, in a structured way that allows those who are, you know, at a basic level and a translational level to be able to plan going forward, to take their projects from bench to bedside through a process? Because often that's often a challenge, isn't it? I mean, you know, Helen, you'll know this. It's often a challenge to be able to say, well, if I start a project here, will I get to there? So, you know, having that focus is really important as well. And that's all within these 8 recommendations that are really very simple and encompass pretty much everything we've discussed today.
Helen, would you agree with that, and Timo as well?
Yeah, I mean, I will just bounce back also on the fact that we should go globally, and Europe has to be competitive. And we see also for the access to medicine for rare diseases, and there should be some harmonization between EMA and FDA, and a way to go really quickly on these conditions. And I also will bounce back also on the fact that what we say always in ERNs is we want to leave no one behind, and there has to be really a European equity. And when you see that in some countries some children can be treated and in other countries they cannot be treated, this is something I think we cannot accept. Mm-hmm. So, and this is summarized overall our discussion today, is we have to give access to all patients with rare diseases to treatment and to trials.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Timo, did you want to come in on that?
Very, very short. So such a plan should take into account the strategically collectively the decisions of patients, organizations, healthcare professionals working in this area to really address their needs. So they need to be in the center. And I believe that we can facilitate this exchange. We can put them in the center of our attention to really address what patients need and what the healthcare professionals need. And we can do it even better by using digital tools like the EHDS, which was already mentioned, but also other interoperable digital infrastructure. And I think this is where we need to spend a bit more time and resources for.
Thank you. That is all we've got time for this afternoon. Thank you so much. Just to sum up, I think, some of the huge discussion we've had this afternoon, but I think it's been a really interesting discussion that's touched on probably just a fraction of the issues that patients and their families face in their day-to-day lives. It's clear that Europe and the EU and the institutions really do want to improve the situation and incentivize the development of drugs really in a targeted way where they're most needed, but there's going to be some challenges with getting industry on board with that, I think, and we're going to have some political challenges as well with the pharma package. It sounds like the European reference networks are in their teenage years and starting to do well, but they do need more investment and really kind of embedding at the national level. And as Olga said, the regulation itself is not going to be a silver bullet to solve all of these problems. There are going to be many other areas, as we've discussed before, in HTA and investing in health systems and more of these public-private partnerships. I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today and to our audience for joining us here in the room and online. We'd love to hear your feedback, so do feel free to email us about the event live@politico.eu, and you can check out the events, further events on our website. We do have our Healthcare Summit coming up in October if you'd like to join us for that. Thank you.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.